Good evening, everyone. And I want to acknowledge that there are indeed some incredibly important people in the room tonight, and I want to acknowledge that many of those people hold positions such as myself in parliamentary levels, whether they're local, state or federal, and for leaders across our community. But importantly, I actually want to acknowledge that every single person sitting in this hall tonight is important, and you are a VIP, both in your nation's history and in our current nation's history, because you stand for a legacy that will not be soon forgotten. Something to know about me is that I believe in the extraordinary capacity for humanity to do good things. I believe in the good in all of us, and that ultimately we can raise each other up. But our history is littered with examples of humanity failing to realise our potential. And nowhere is this more evident than in the truth we find when we seek to understand what happened to Armenian, Assyrian and Greek Orthodox peoples during the period from 1914 through to 1916 at the hands of the Ottoman Empire. At the time, there was literally not a word in the English language to describe the systematic destruction of the Armenian people. Hundreds and thousands of Armenians were arrested, deported, starved, and sentenced to death marches through the Syrian desert. These actions put an end to more than 2,000 years of Armenian civilization in eastern Anatolia. But it wasn't until 1941 that the writer Raphael Lemkin, who was himself a Polish-born lawyer who had fled the persecution of the Holocaust in 1941, coined the word genocide. Lemkin had heard a radio address in which the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, described the horrors of the Second World War, telling listeners that, and I quote, "We are in the presence of a crime without a name." Lemkin, who had lost many of his family in the Holocaust, understood the problem of mass murder was not new, and indeed he was outraged by the crimes he knew had been committed by the Ottoman Empire against the Armenians during World War I, and the fact that not only had they happened, but they had gone unpunished. He decided he had to come up with a name for the crime with no name, to enable the world to develop and recognise law and language to help prevent future atrocities. The word genocide was created. It combines the ancient Greek word for genos, which means race or tribe, and the Latin side, which means killing. And he defined it as the destruction of a nation or an ethnic group. Lemkin was among the first people to describe the massacre of the Ottoman Armenians as genocide. And tonight, I am truly honoured to join you, many direct descendants of survivors of the Armenian genocide, to hold tight to the memory of the 1.5 million Armenians who lost their lives. We do remember, we will not forget, and we are not frightened to call it what it was, genocide. 108 years ago, in what is widely recognised as our country's first major humanitarian relief effort, Australian citizens provided aid to the survivors and orphans of the Armenian genocide. And while we should take pride in these efforts, the fact that 108 years on, our modern day government continues to fail to formally acknowledge the actions of that time as acts of genocides remains a source of disappointment for many, including myself. If we can't or won't name it and hold those who have perpetuated it responsible, then the truth is that we are bound to continue to repeat the mistakes of the past. It is up to us, ordinary people, like everybody in this hall, in this room, and the governments that represent us, to use the legal and political tools at our fingertips to not only prosecute the perpetrators of genocide, but to work towards preventing it from ever happening. As the local member for North Sydney, I am incredibly proud of our local Armenian Australian community, and I will absolutely continue to stand by you. And tonight, I am proud to continue the legacy forged by my predecessors who have represented the people of North Sydney, calling on Turkey to come to terms with its own history and for Australia to recognise this crime for what it was, genocide. Thank you.